So if I think of my hip by my hands, if I'm looking up, you can see how this part, lower back, neck, doing most of the movement. If we pull McCoy out, and we said, you know, hands on our hips. That's hands on the hips that we're used to doing and that we did as kindergartners. But is this really our hip? And if you look on the skeleton and the bones, this is not our hip. Our hip is here. This is the hip. This is the iliac crest. But we think of this as our hip. And it's not even the same zip code. The hip's way down here on the opposite side of the pelvis. And just to kind of show you what I meant, if I think of my hips here, that means when I look up, I'm going to be bending from the low back and the neck. And the bending is going to be coming from here. But if I change my thinking so my hip is here, then I can move from my pelvis. And I can use this, the movement of the hip joints, the extension of the hip, to move the pelvis in a way that's going to move my whole torso and spine up, so I don't have to do as much work in the lower back or in the neck. So with everybody standing for a moment, I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and we're going to get a better idea of where the hip is. So as we said, we think the hip is here. But to find your actual hip, and you can do this if you want, if you slide down, you're going to feel the bump in the front. That's the front of your crest of the pelvis. And you'll notice if you go down and in a little bit, maybe halfway or so, your hip is there. Okay. So what I would do, I find my crest here, and I'm gonna follow in, and if I get down just a little bit above the pubic bone, that's gonna be where the joint is. And if I kind of wiggle my leg in and out, I may be able to feel this joint open and close a little bit. And then I think Janet and Martha covered it. If you feel the outside of your leg right about here, you'll notice, because sometimes we think this is our hip because this bone is easier to feel, but this is your greater trochanter, which is on the opposite end of your hip. So if you feel the outside of your leg up toward the top, you may be able to feel this. If you move your leg a little in and out, you may be able to feel that bone rotating a little bit. And if you look on this, as this bone rotates a little bit, and you can feel this move, then you know that there's going to be movement in where the head of the femur meets the socket of the hip, in there. So just to let you know what we're going to do in this lesson, I'm going to bend his knee a little bit. We're going to think about moving in different ways. So one way we're going to think about moving, and maybe it will be easier to see like this. One way we can move is we can move both the pelvis and the leg together like that. So that's one thing we'll explore. Another thing we're going to explore is the pelvis not moving, but the leg is moving. And you can see how the ball of the femur is rotating in the hip socket. It's just the leg moves, so we're going to be playing with that. We're also going to be playing with this, with keeping the leg still and moving the pelvis around the leg. So now you can see how the pelvis is revolving. The socket is revolving around the ball of the hip. We're going to play with that. And then we're gonna play with the pelvis tilting backwards as the leg moves downward, pelvis tilting forward as the leg comes upward. And now you can see a lot of movement and motion going on with the hip there. Now, one other thing before we sit down, it's easier to feel the hip joint from the back and the front, and you can try this. If you find back here your sacrum and the tailbone, and if you go to the side of the sacrum and out a little bit and around a little bit to right about here, you're going to find the hip joint. So you find the sacrum, and it's easier to find laying down than standing up because the glutes kind of get in the way. But you may be able to find that little place just outside of the sacrum where when you move your leg in and out, you can feel a folding and an unfolding of that joint. Okay, so that's our skeleton demo. And if anybody is just watching the demo, they should be able to do the rest of the lesson if they go to the Sense website. Well, let's continue on to the rest of the lesson.